Okay, the story of Hagar, Genesis chapter 16. An interesting chapter. Sarai ends up offering her handmaid to her husband because she hasn't had any children yet. What could possibly go wrong, right? We'll find out. Introducing Hagar the Egyptian. Does everybody have a note? Something to take some notes on? Okay. Hagar the Egyptian and how she changed the world. This chapter literally changes everything. Of course, every chapter kind of changes everything. Let's just do a little bit of a review from chapter 15. Last week, Abram cut a covenant with God. And the strength of that covenant that took place last week is epic. God himself is Abram's shield and his great reward. God completed both parties' parts of the death walk. Remember, there was Abram brought animals. All he had to do was to bring the sacrifices to and prepare the sacrifices for God. That was his job. Hey, Cynthia. Good morning. Okay, we're talking about the epic covenant that God cut with Abraham last week. God completed, in that death walk, usually when two parties would come together and cut a covenant, one party would walk one way through a very river of blood between the two animals, and the other party would walk the other way, and they would swear to one another and make exchanges of certain things. That's how a covenant was cut, but then it was durable. That's how a durable covenant is cut. And last week, we found out that Abraham had to do was to bring the animals, to bring the sacrifices. I come to think of it, that's exactly what Judah had to do on Passover. They had to bring the sacrifice to be the Passover lamb. Now, that's not exactly how they were thinking about it. They were thinking they were going to get rid of this guy who was causing them so much trouble. But that covenant is epic. The covenant says that if somebody breaks this covenant, somebody's going to die. And God said, Abram, you just rest a bit. I'm going to walk both ways through this walk of death. Meaning that if Abraham or his descendants screwed up, God himself would pay the price for breaking the covenant. And he did. Judah fulfilled their job. Their job was to bring the lamb of sacrifice to the Passover. They didn't have any idea how important that particular Passover was going to be. Unfortunately, many of Judah missed their visitation. Just like Yeshua, Matthew 24, he's sitting on the side of the mountain and he's weeping over Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I would have gathered you together under my wings as a hen gathers her chicks. And you would not. Right? So, bless Judah's heart, they missed their visitation. It kind of opened up the gates for all others who would come. So maybe that was on purpose. Who knows? I don't know. Obviously, many in Judah found him as Messiah, but many in Judah, especially among the leadership, refused him and rejected him. So enough said about that. At any rate, that's all Abraham had to do last week was to bring the sacrifices. God said, I'm going to put you to sleep. I'm going to do this whole thing myself. God took on the whole responsibility of the covenant. It's up to God to keep the covenant. When God makes a covenant, I'm just to make a point, he binds himself to the covenant. I think we talked about that last week. He literally binds himself to the covenant. You can darn well bet you, Tina, you'll see to it, right? Everything in the covenant will be taken care of, followed through on. Okay, so because this covenant was for all time and it will not fail. That's what you stand on today, the covenant that we have with God. That's amazing. No wonder we sang hallelujah so much this morning, huh? So, chapter 16, Sarai and Hagar. Sarai is still called Sarai. Her name has not yet been changed. And this passage is literally, it's a narrative. And it includes conversations, two conversations between Sarah and Abram. Abram hasn't had his name changed yet either. Probably a good thing. And the angel of the Lord and Hagar. So we have two conversations. So what we're going to do today is do a little bit of eavesdropping. We're going to eavesdrop on this conversation. So Steve, if you will, you got the microphone there? You good to go? Good to go. Genesis chapter 16 and 1 through 6.
Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her." And of course, Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she's pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." "Your slave is in your hands," Abram said. "Do with her whatever you think best." Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her.
Yikes. Did you notice how Steve's voice naturally kind of went to nasty, nasty when he was speaking Sarah's words, and okay when he was speaking Abram's words? Interesting.
Of course. You asked me to read.
I did. I certainly did. Okay.
It doesn't mention here that they waited 10 years, so this wasn't a quick...
No. They've been there for 10 years. They've been there for 10 years. Okay, here we go. So Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she was an Egyptian. She had an Egyptian maidservant, and her name was Hagar. And why would Sarai have a servant from Egypt is my first question to you. Here's the answer.
It was given off to Pharaoh.
Yeah, remember?
It was Pharaoh's...
Remember when good old Abram had said, "Oh my gosh, pretend like you're, tell Pharaoh you're my sister," and she was a half sister. Tell him you're my sister, otherwise he'll take you and kill me, and then what are we going to do? You know. So and after that, Pharaoh kind of is wondering why all of his men, himself and all of his men, are impotent for 2 years, and he finally figures out that it's because he's taken this man's wife, so he gives her back, and a whole bunch of stuff with it, livestock and people. Hagar was one of the people he gave to Abram when he left. All right, so looking back on this situation, would it have been better for Abram to turn down those gifts from Pharaoh just as he had turned down the gift from the king of Sodom a couple weeks ago? Maybe. I think history would have turned out differently had he done that, but regardless, he didn't. But just something to consider. Had the wealth he received from Pharaoh become kind of a stumbling block for this guy? Maybe just a little bit. But regardless, 10 years later, there's no heir. They have been on a 10-year camping trip, if you will. God says, "I want you to leave your land, and I want you to go to a land that I'm going to show you," right? And now Sarah's thinking, because women think these things through. Maybe we overthink things sometimes.
Same.
She's going, what land? What land are we talking about? And what heir? I don't have any kids. And we're living amongst all these people around here. We don't have an heir, therefore we don't have any land. Think about that. 10 years. That's a long time to wait. What were you doing in 2009? Real quick, Chris. Thank you. Raising kids. What were you doing in 2009? You got your mouth full? Never mind. What are you doing in 2009? You can't remember that far back, right? Yeah.
Moving up here.
Joel's moving up here. Okay.
Same thing I'm doing now.
You've always been teaching school. Yes. Yes.
Just picture like a Jewish wife from New Jersey going, yeah, the land, the land, the land. He's always talking about the land. He's talking about the heirs, the heirs, the heirs. There's no land, there's no heirs.
Perfect.
I can just see it.
That's perfect. That is. Thank you. Thank you.
Yada, yada, yada.
Yada, yada, yada. So at any rate, Sarah decides she's waited long enough, and she's going to step in and help. I think Sarah has an A personality, probably, right? More than likely. Abram, the father of the faith, and Sarai try to rush God's plan. God's promised Abram land and a family, and so far he's got neither. So Sarai's going to provide a family for themselves rather than trust and wait on God. Have you ever found yourself in that situation where you just kind of push the envelope just a little? Okay.
We're trying to help God.
So we know she's going to have a son, and this is going to be the son of his flesh. The works of our flesh oftentimes are not worth a whole lot. They're not worth the same thing. You know when you have a work of the flesh, and you know when the Spirit of God has delivered something into your realm. Right? We can tell the difference. This is not going to be the son of God's promise. Okay, so Hagar, let's talk about her just a little bit. Hagar, it's made up of two words, the ha. Anybody remember what the hey on the beginning of a Hebrew word means? It means the. And this word gar means stranger. So this is not her name. This is what she is. She is a stranger. Sarah won't even. We don't even know what her name is until later. But the stranger. Okay, so Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar. She took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, and gave her to her husband. So this is a situation where Sarai took and gave. She took and gave. She took and gave. Okay? I don't know why I think that's such a big deal, but I think it's a big deal. So let's try and step into Sarai's head and what she was thinking. Though God had maybe this is what she was thinking. Just consider this. Though God had promised Abram a son, God never included me in that promise. Would you please say that in a New Jersey accent?
God had promised Abram, I don't know what that phrase. God had promised Abram a son. God had never included me in that promise. Spent 10 years in the land.
There you go. I'm going to do something about this.
Well, you see what I put up with? We're praying for you.
Okay, so God never said that Abram would have a son through me. He only said that Abram would have a son. Can you see? This is how women will. I can see this. Can you see this? This is how women would start thinking, right?
Was she 90?
Pardon me?
Was there a 90?
Not quite.
No, she's 76 at this point. But think about that. Women will think this thing through. She probably laid awake at night, tossing and turning and thinking. She goes, wait a minute, God never said that I was going to have a son. She just said that Abram was going to have a son. So maybe with Hagar, she's her best handmaiden. Maybe if I give her Hagar, maybe she can produce an heir for me. Because she wasn't thinking that Hagar was going to keep him. She was thinking she would have him. Yes. Somebody have a hand.
Abram was legally hurt too. Hey, what's going on? Come on. Why aren't you having your kids?
It's your fault. Maybe they were pointing at each other. It's your fault.
Well, we have to remember our adversary is very smart. And he's also a good lawyer. If he plants reasonable doubt in her mind on what God said, then she is going to question, is this really what God said, or should I take things in my own hands?
Reasonable doubt.
Like what happened with Eve. So
exactly.
I think it's reasonable doubt.
Reasonable doubt. There's that's a good thought. That term had not entered my head this week, so that's very good. Reasonable doubt. That's all we have to have in a trial to find somebody not guilty. Yes, ma'am.
Well, until this episode, at least if I understand it correctly, neither one of them know whose fault it is. Is it Sarah's fault, or is it Abraham?
Or is it God's fault? Did we not hear correctly, right?
No, but I mean,
Yeah.
can he father a child through someone else or not?
Or not?
You know, they're blaming her. But
Maybe she's doubling down, huh? I don't.
Yeah, maybe he can father a child anyway, but too bad he doesn't.
Well, okay, here we go. See, I love this. So we still have a great big even at the bottom of this slide, even at the, okay, so it's always a bad idea, but now let's go back to the spiritual plane. It's always a bad idea to try to accomplish God's plan in your own way and in your own timing. Maybe, huh? God's plan, complete with his methods and his timing, when we try to tinker with it, we could mess everything up. And a good example, if you want to write this down, is 1 Samuel 13. And that's where Saul had his army. He'd been king for about a year, and he had his army up there. They were about to attack the Philistines, and Samuel told him to wait till he got up there, and he would offer the sacrifices. So he waited, and he waited, and he waited, and Samuel didn't come. And Saul says, well, anybody can kill and cook a bull. That was his attitude. Anybody can do that. I'll just do it myself. Just get out of my way. I'll just offer the sacrifice myself. So when Samuel shows up, he says, what have you done? That's exactly what God said to Adam and Eve in the garden, wasn't it? What is this you have done? You've acted foolishly. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yahuwah would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now, your kingdom shall not continue. Okay? So that's not good news for a man who has only been king for about a year. But that's what happens when we try to rush God. Okay? We wonder, so everybody on a political level, everybody's kind of wondering, why is all this taking so long because God's plan is being worked out. Once again, I'll remind you, we are watching God's kingdom being established right in front of our eyes. Don't rush it, don't push it, help it, support it, but we can't try to take things into our own hands and just mess things up. David, on the other hand, was exactly the opposite. God told David through the prophet Samuel, same prophet, that he would be king after Saul. And Saul remember, Saul chased David all over the countryside, and there was lots and lots of times he could have taken Saul's life. He had plenty of opportunity to kill him and take the throne. But David, watch this, and you can fill your name in here. But your name, David, wanted God's plan to be carried out in God's way according to God's timing. That's what we want to have happen today, right? And so, he waited. This is one of the reasons why David was a man after God's own heart. Because he waited on God. He didn't try to rush things. So at any rate, so back to Sarai. She thinks she has options. I love this picture. She thinks she has options at this point in time. So Sarai said to Abram, please go into my maid. Perhaps I shall obtain children by her. So that's her intent, that Sarai was going to obtain children from her handmaid. And sometimes God only tells us what he's going to do, not exactly how and or when he's going to do it. Yes, ma'am?
Wasn't that normal in that culture at that time?
Yeah, we'll get there, in just a minute. Yeah, it was. So Sarai is old and barren and considers that this family Abram is promised by God could come through another woman. Okay? So not having a woman was considered during that time the woman's fault. So she's going to fix it. Sarai gives Egyptian handmaid into the family line, and this will affect the family now from that time forward. Okay? And so they're talking things over. This is what's going to happen. Okay. So with Hagar pregnant, it's proof positive that Sarai was sterile. To answer your question. And in those days, to answer Bonnie's comment, in that culture, in those days and in that culture, it was considered a curse to be barren, so Sarai was going to try to help fix it. Okay? But, and when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress became despised in her eyes. Who despised who? Hagar despised Sarah. Hagar's pregnant, she's not. Nanner. Became one of those things. So at first things seemed to work out just fine. Everything went according to plan. Oh, good. Look and she's pregnant. Yay. Hagar conceived just as Sarai wanted, but with all schemes gone awry, there were unexpected and negative consequences. And Hagar began to despise Sarai. This is what's now step into in the Hagar's mind. Yeah. Hagar's pregnant and she's young and she's cute, and Sarai's not. And perhaps Sarai will take. Perhaps Hagar will take Sarai's place. Okay. Well, it's going against the girl code there altogether, right? Okay. So Sarai's plan worked, but not quite as she had imagined. Okay. And she said. Now she's talking to Abram, because that's the only conversation we're having here in these first 6 verses. My wrong be upon you. I made my servant into I gave my maid into your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, I became despised in her eyes. So the Lord judged between you and me. This was my plan, and now she hates me, and now it's all your fault.
Wasn't she the one that said, do this?
Yeah.
Kyle.
See, the man's first response. He's saying, Kyle, shut up.
Just stating the obvious.
It was his idea. Well, you don't know.
Just saying. Okay.
Sure, that's true.
So in effect, Sarah was saying.
Always your fault.
In effect, Sarai was saying to Abram, why did you listen to me? You should have known better than to go out and be with that woman. Now look what's happened. She despises me. It wasn't like, oh good, she's pregnant. You're going to have a baby. We got an heir on the way. Now it's no, she despises me.
But she's speaking some truth there.
Yes, she is.
Because I'm sorry to say this, but we girls do want our husbands to speak wisdom into us and control us a little bit.
Sure we do. Sure, absolutely.
We have a tendency to.
The men keep women, and guys, we all admit this. The men keep the women grounded on the ground. And without the men, women would just fly off into the atmosphere like a balloon filled with helium. We would.
But on the other hand, women have such a
I'm not laughing.
Holy Spirit, right? The Holy Spirit, that when their husbands listen to them, then they.
When it works beautifully. And when somebody's not in agreement or in some kind of a rebellion, it doesn't work at all. It goes disastrous. Just a minute. Your wife is a good thing. He who finds a good wife finds a good thing, right? Yes, ma'am.
One of the problems was that we see her as a handmaid, but she was really a princess because he wouldn't have given her just any old.
Well, yeah, but it's right. But she became her handmaiden. That's true.
But she was raised differently. The Bible says if you raise a servant as a son, he will become like a son rather than like a servant. And so she could do maiden things, but in her heart she was a servant.
Yeah. Okay, she was a princess in her heart. That's for sure. So, I'm sorry.
Like Sarai anymore, she was angry at Sarai that she had to do this sort of thing with an old man, and
Could,
That might have been.
could be. She's, oh my gosh, from Hagar's point of view, doggone it, I'm pregnant and da-da-da, and yeah, whatever. Because she doesn't have the picture. She's about to get the picture. She's about to get the picture, and we'll see the effect that this has on things. So was this a sin? And if so, was it Abraham's sin or was it Sarai's sin?
Yes.
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 Or now we're going to come into modern Christianity here just a little bit, or was it dereliction of duty on the part of Abram? So the husband, the one in charge, wait just a second for your comments. Does this refer back to Genesis chapter 3 when Adam did not take charge of the situation? I think it reflects back to there too. It's the pattern that goes round and round. So Sarai winds up treating Hagar very harshly. And with Abram washing his hands of the conflict between his two wives, he now has two wives, Sarai began treating Hagar harshly. And this is the word anah? Anah. And it's in the PL stem. It literally means to be humiliated. Okay? She's humiliating Hagar. And we'll see this word again when the Egyptians treat the Israelites harshly. The Exodus, it's the same word, anah. Okay? It's the same word. It's amazing. So, let's take a look, a couple things here about husbands and Gary Smalley. You all know who Gary Smalley is, right?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Now the deck is stacked.
Now the deck is stacked. Gary Smalley writes in one of his books, if a couple has been married for more than 5 years, any persistent disharmony in their marriage is usually attributed to the husband's lack of understanding and applying genuine love. John Stocker used to say, I think if you've been married more than 5 years, if there's anything wrong, husbands, it's your fault. I'm not pointing the stick at anybody, but...
Starting to be his fault.
He goes on to say that after 5 years of marriage, if a husband has failed to understand or seek help from the major causes of disharmony, either he doesn't understand what genuine love is or has chosen to ignore God's command to be the shepherd of his family and do it wisely. Okay? Gary Smalley's a guy he's a marriage counselor. So Sarai says, "My wrong be upon you," and she's right. Is she right? I think she's right. I don't know. Sarai, Abram could have said, he could have, but he didn't. He could have said, no, we're not going to do that. He said, okay.
Give him.
Listen, he's a guy, right? Yeah, well, that's where all sin kind of comes from. First, we don't believe God. Yeah, yeah. Their trust. We'll get there. Hang with me. Eve. If we go back to Eve's situation, Adam could have said, "No, we're not going to do that." He could have said, "No, we're not taking any of that fruit from that tree." He was with her. Remember? He was with her at the time of that. So Abram could have said, "No, I love you, and God will provide for you, and I will stay faithful to you."
And God.
And God. Yes. That's what Abram could have done, but he didn't. Okay? And the results of his decision, we have the Ishmaelites of today, the Arabs of today. Okay?
Not that that's a curse.
Not that that's a curse, but but it is the result. Yeah, and we'll get, thank you, Joel, we'll get there. We're not going down a cul-de-sac like that, I promise. But was this the best thing for Abram to do? Or is this going to go from bad to worse? Let's find out. So in verse 6, Abram said to Sarai, "Indeed, your maid is in your hand. Do with her as you please." Now, I think he said it in a little bit of an exasperated tone. Paul, why don't you read that in the tone of voice maybe that you think that you hear it, that might have been said.
All right. So Abraham said to Sarai, "Indeed, your maid is in your hand. do to her as you please. And when Sarai dealt harshly with her, she fled from her presence.
I need you to be a little bit more of a method actor there. You see it? Indeed, from a man's point of view, and you were sitting there agreeing with me just a minute ago. Indeed, he's exasperated with his wife.
Well, I never pretend to be an actor, but indeed your maid is in your hand.
You're too nice. Good night.
Do it in Spanish.
It sounds better in Spanish.
Yeah.
Yes, we will.
All right. I need an exasperated. Kyle.
Come on.
Come on, Kyle.
You don't have to do it in Spanish.
Pretend you two are just alone.
Yeah.
Nobody else is listening. Go ahead.
No one's watching.
Do whatever you want with her.
There you go.
Whatever.
Whatever.
Whatever you want. Just get rid of her.
Indeed, your maid is in your hand. Do as you please. Okay. Hagar would have a son because of Abram, and Abram should have been there to provide for her and protect her. He should not have said, indeed, do with her as you please. Because we don't know what the answer to that is. Abram should have taken responsibility for his actions. There's a whole lot of guys out we'll just talk about our country, that have fathered children who are not taking responsibility for their actions, right? Abram wanted to ignore it. He wanted to avoid the consequences and not assume any responsibility for this pregnancy, or this situation. And it just makes women go, Lots of questions. Hard to see our beloved Abram act this way. I don't think I've ever really considered that until this year. It's hard to see him act that way. Why? Because he's the father of our faith. And he's acting like he doesn't have any faith. You kind of start splitting that out and read it slowly, spending some time with the verses. The sages, not wanting any recorded black mark on the patriarch, they absolved him of any wrongdoing in this matter whatsoever. The rabbis do not hold Abram responsible for this situation. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, very good.
Isn't that interesting?
Well, I also imagine if we go back a little ways when Abraham and Sarai went into Egypt and he instructed his wife to say, disregard yourself as my sister, because he was literally afraid of being killed on her behalf. And she was elder. She was not 25 years old. She was already past the age of probably 50 at that age. So, I'm sure after this whole thing played out, and she got back together with her husband after being in Pharaoh's harem, I could imagine the conversation that she had with him saying, how on earth could you put me in that stage of risk? And I think she put the fear of God into him by saying, don't you ever do that to me again, or you are in big trouble. So he's probably like, okay, honey, I will not say that and have somebody else take you away into the harem. So I think he was making up for what he did.
All this guilt is just kind of following him around then, is kind of what you're saying. And he's remembering.
If you want somebody to do what you want, you either put him in fear or you put him in guilt. And he had both.
He was
fear,
a man.
Death,
Ooh.
and guilt.
And guilt. That's a good observation.
I think she's been the dripping faucet. I think Sarah's been the dripping faucet, and he had it. So she came up with the idea, and he said, okay,
Whatever.
I'm done.
Yeah.
That could be. A couple of really good suggestions on the table. Let's see what happens. This should be a reminder to all of us. Maybe we put Abram too high on a pedestal. I think he finally got there, but it's not the perfect man that God uses and calls. If that was so, he wouldn't be using any of us. Is there anybody in the room that's not in that group? Okay. the pattern is that God redeems and cleanses sinners and enables them to do his service. Okay? That's the whole point. So the father of our faith is not someone who never failed, but someone who persevered after he failed. Okay?
Yeah.
The guy didn't give up. He's going, let's see, I have this covenant with God, and I'm going to call upon it, and I'm going to call upon it. So he throws his, I love this slide. He takes responsibility eventually, but not right now. And he, right now, just throwing up his hands. And he puts all the responsibility over on Sarah. Whatever, Sarah. Whoever said that, I agree. Do whatever you think best. Well, dealing harshly with Hagar is what Sarai thought best. That's really sad. Okay? That's the end of that scene. Let's go ahead and do 7 through 16. Steve, finish the chapter.
The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from? And where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress Sarai, she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, Go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. The angel of the Lord also said to her, You are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. Yada, yada, yada. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. That is why the well was called Bir Lahai Roi. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael.
Okay, let's see where these verses take us. So, at a spring on the way, an angel appeared to Hagar and instructed her to return to Sarai. That's the short story.
Who is the angel of the Lord?
We'll get there. We'll get there. At the spring on the way, I just thought that was a beautiful picture.
Yeah, it was nice.
Spring on the way, an angel appears to Hagar. Remember, God has a covenant with Abram. Keep that in mind. Okay, so that, on the way to Shur, in trying to avoid the consequences of his actions, Abram allowed Hagar to be abused. And that's what she was. Physically, no. Emotionally, oh yeah. You can tell a pregnant woman, hit the road, Jack? Out. You're out.
Well, let's look at this in real time. If you and your husband were legally married before your friends and family, and in this case, Hagar had a part of this woman being his mistress, providing a son. So what legally binding woman would want to have her husband's mistress and child living in the same home, and then the husband and the mistress and the child having that bond and that relationship? I mean, no woman in her mind would want the mistress living there in her own house. Get out of here.
Get out of here. Except it was Sarai that invited her into the house to begin with.
Then she had second thoughts, and a lot of women do have second thoughts about, okay, I've changed my mind.
Not after.
Did say she ran away though?
She.
But wasn't she actually his wife?
She was his wife. He took her as a wife. It wasn't a mistress. It was a wife. She gave him to her as a wife.
Yeah.
She was playing the role as a surrogate. Good point. Okay. But God, the righteous and just judge, always sees the plight of the abused and the forsaken. And though Abram has not provided for Hagar, God's going to step in. Because why? Because God has a covenant. Yes. Okay, let's look at what this, on the way of Shur, it's one of the highways of the wilderness. So this is Israel up here. Here's the Dead Sea. This is the Gulf of Aqaba.
That's the Red Sea.
This is the Gulf of Aqaba. This is the Gulf of Aqaba right here. This is where they're going to cross the land over here. So, and here's Goshen. Here's okay, so there's 3 highways. I-25, when I say that, you all know what I mean. If I say I-80, you understand what I mean, right? Okay. So the way of the Philistines is up here by the way of the sea. Here's the way of Shur. This is the highway we're talking about, somewhere on this line, and the way of Arabia. Okay, give you an idea geographically where we're talking about. So do you think that Hagar might have felt just a little bitter having been thrown out of the house?
Oh, yeah.
A little bit of bitterness. Hagar's pregnant. She has been chased out by Sarai, and Abram didn't do anything about it. Where will she go? And watch, the circle's going to appear right here. Where's that? Lahai, Roy. Anyway, we'll get there in a minute, but it's down here. Here's Goshen. Okay, wilderness of Shur. Here's the way of Shur. She's traveling on this road somewhere, just to give you an idea of the plane. So let's talk about bitterness here for just a minute. It's a root. The root of bitterness. As Christians, we've all heard of that. We aren't supposed to have one, right? Bitterness is a root. Hebrews 12:15 says, looking diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. A root of bitterness can defile many people. It doesn't just affect one, ever. So what is a root? A root is a source or a bubbling fountain that is lying under the surface. Okay? Roots don't directly manifest or make themselves known, but are a source of nutrition or fuel for other elements that are on the surface. You don't usually see a plant showing off its root system. But if the plant didn't have a root system, it wouldn't survive. So a root's job is not to manifest on the surface, but to brew under the surface and fuel things that are on the surface. That makes sense? Brew, right? Okay. All right. So here's a picture. This guy doesn't often show his roots off, right? All right, so let's take a closer look at a roots plant system. Roots dwell under the surface of the soil. We can't see them because it's hidden under the soil or the surface. The same is true of bitterness in a person's soul. It's a hidden element that lies under the surface in your heart. And out of it springs up anger and other negative emotions against others and against circumstances around us. So if you find yourself bursting into things of anger, you might want to ask the Lord about it. Have I got a root of bitterness hiding out down there? And if I do, what are you going to do about it, God? If I do, if I give it to you, will you pull it out? He will. He will. He'll heal it. God is a heart healer. He will heal your heart. We just spend an entire time of either wounded or getting wounded or being wounded or trying not to wound someone else. Okay, Hagar may have returned, but demons, they thrive on bitterness. They eat bitterness for breakfast. Okay, they do. Unforgiveness, and it's a wide open door for them to move right in on a person and develop many spiritual, mental, and even physical bondages. Just ask yourself, how much demonic activity do we see in the world today that's originated from a root of bitterness? And then, as a result of that, then many others become defiled. Okay, so map-wise, territory of the Ishmaelites, I just throw this in here. Here's Egypt over here. Here's the Sinai Peninsula, and this is the territory that the Ishmaelites are going to eventually wind up dwelling in. Give you an idea. Well, on the way to Shur. Okay. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is where, in this area, on the wilderness of Shur, this is where Moses, when he brought the children of Israel out of Egypt, and they went 3 days out into the wilderness and they found no water, and they came to the Marah, where they could not drink the waters because they were bitter. And can't be for sure. So it can't be for sure if that's where Hagar went or not, but it could be likely. So, but the messenger of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh shows up and takes care of her, and it could be that the bitter waters of Marah right there, that the family of Abram visited after the crossing of the Red Sea. It's a very possibility. I read a couple of articles on that, and it's very possible. So there's Hagar out in the wilderness, no food, no place to go, and she's pregnant. And the angel, and I agree with Paul, I think this is Yeshua, the angel of the Lord, when you see the angel of the Lord, when you see the word the in front of it, because in Hebrew it's going to be ha, and that's a definite article, it means this particular angel. When you see an angel of the Lord, that could be any old angel, but when you see the word the angel of the Lord, it's probably the pre-incarnate visitation of Yeshua, of Jesus. So this angel, Yeshua, trying to help and give her some direction, asks her, where have you come from and where are you going? Where have you come from and where are you going? And she said, is that two questions? She answers one. She says, I'm fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai. And she doesn't really answer either one of them, come to think of it. It's kind of a middle-of-the-road answer. Well, Hagar's no longer the handmaiden of Sarai. She and her son will be woven into the history of the story of Israel. So let's just take this for granted. The messenger already knows who she is and where she's from, right? Check, check. Notice that she only answers one of the questions, and she doesn't answer that one very well. I'm fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai. He doesn't rebuke her, but he gently corrects her, and he tells her what to do. And he tells her, return to your mistress and submit yourself under her hand. And come to think of it, back to what Dolores said a few minutes ago, I think that's exactly right. She ran away. Sarah didn't tell her to get out. That's later, after Ishmael's 13 years old. She ran away because of the harsh treatment. She ran away because of the harsh treatment. Okay. He doesn't rebuke her. He doesn't, but gently corrects her. This is, okay, let's just say it this way. God's wrath is not falling on this woman, right? And if you come to him, if you come and ask him to help you with whatever, fill in the blank, he will not yell at you. You need to stop and think about that for a little bit. He won't yell at his kids. How many times does he ask you, where have you been? What in the world have you been doing? What are you doing? Have you ever had that kind of an experience? And where are you? What in the world? Where do you think you're going?
Do you think that's giving us time to reflect on who we are and what he does and time to return?
Absolutely. Absolutely. He's always asking. I think sometimes, and I really, if I can get anything over to you guys at all, it's about this relationship that we have with God. He loves you. And he's a very, very good father. And he's not going to spank you. He's going to say, well, come over here and let's sit down, let's talk this out. Let's reason this through, right? Exactly.
But there are also consequences.
Sure.
Disobeying our Father.
And he'll let you know that too.
Yeah.
He'll let you know that. He's not going to give you a cookie and pat you on the tutu and just say, "No, go have a good time. Go play in the backyard." No, he's going to. He'll show you. He'll show you what's going on, and he'll show you how to correct it. Yes. What do you think you're doing? And then he says, "I love this. Tell you what I'm going to do. Tell you what I'm going to. Tell you what I am going to do. Tell you what I'm going to do." Then the angel of the Lord said to her, "I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so that they shall not be counted for a multitude." And I have wrestled with that verse all week long. I'm going, what? There's going to be multitudes and multitudes and multitudes of descendants from her. Wow. That should give us a clue as to who the angel of Yotevave is, the angel of the Lord is. If it wasn't him, he wouldn't be saying that. Angels don't go around making decrees like that. "I will multiply your descendants exceedingly."
And then the name Yeshua, or Ishmael, means God is.
Okay? And the angel of the Lord said to her, "Behold, you are with child." Does this not sound familiar, like in about the book of Luke? "Behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard of your affliction." And here's the caveat, but he shall be a wild man, and his hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all of his brethren. He's not going to dwell, they're going to dwell together in his brethren. What that means. Stay tuned, but wait, there's more. That's what I just said. I just made 2 copies of that. Okay, Muslims claim that God actually promised the land promised the land of Israel to Ishmael, and that the Jews stole it from them, and that the Bible is a Jewish lie. Remember, Ishmaelites and Israelites are half brothers. Okay? That's an important concept to grab a hold of. Look how close Ishmael is to Israel. Ishmael literally means God hears, and Israel means God prevails. Okay? So, affliction. Ishmael will experience great affliction at the hands of others, and he will cause great affliction as well. From Hagar is going to come a multitude of descendants. And just as Isaac has physical and spiritual descendants, so also does Ishmael. Let's see. Jacob's going to have 12 sons, and there are going to be 12 tribes. Ishmael's going to have 12 sons, and there's going to be tribes of them. Multitudes and multitudes of people are going to come from them. And they're half brothers. And that covenant is available to them. But God cut the covenant with Abraham, and the son of promise is going to be Isaac, not through Ishmael. Does that mean Ishmael cannot come over and become part of God's family? Absolutely not. They certainly can. The door's wide open for everybody to come. Everybody. He's not willing that any should perish. Both of these guys are sons of Abraham. One is going to be the son of the flesh, that's Ishmael, and one's going to be the son of promise, Isaac. But God has a covenant out there that's big enough for all of them. The blessings, the blessings of the covenant are certainly going to come through Isaac's sons. Am I saying this correctly?
Yeah.
Am I saying this correctly? Okay. Ishmael is a big deal, and he's going to be someone that the whole world is contending with now. Okay?
He comes to keep the law.
These promises precede the law. That's exactly right. And they're there, and so I have never been I've never spent a lot of time praying for the salvation of the Arab people. And maybe we should be, because this is to them just like it's to us, you know?
Well, I pray for the lost because I think they're lost.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that includes a multitude of people.
A multitude of people. Yep. Okay. Interesting stuff. So, let me finish my thought here. So, whereas Abram's descendants through Sarai will bring blessings to the world, Hagar's are going to bring strife, and that's true, because their hand is going to be against every man, and every man's hand's going to be. I mean, they're just going to be in conflict all the time. And now, am I speaking of? Myra really corrected me on this the other day, but so we're not speaking necessarily of Islam. It has gone down to Islam, but Islam did not come about until the 600s. Okay, so Ishmael's sons, for thousands of years, were Ishmael's sons, all right? And a group of people out there that were fighting with each other and fighting everybody else, but it's not. But it has morphed into Islam. A lot of them, right? And they passed along the attitude, and the Islamic people have picked it up. And I think that's fair to say. Okay. Hagar come a multitude of descendants. Okay. And she says to him, "Oh my gosh, you are in verse 13, you are the God who sees." Or she said, "Have I also seen him who sees me?" So now we're talking about the mother of Ishmael, who says, whose son's name God hears, and she confesses, "Oh my gosh, you're the God who sees me." Seeing and hearing. We can see things and we can hear things, but that's not the same as shmine, I don't think. Shmine is hearing and doing, not hearing and seeing. Shema, Israel. It's about doing the things that are in this word. And Ishmaelites today are essentially saying that the Jewish people, and they're talking about Israel, have stolen stuff from them. Muslims are saying that, but then they're the descendants of Ishmaelites. Yeah.
Not Ishmaelites think that Islam.
Right.
Yeah, according to the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah, according to those books that it has morphed into. That it has morphed into. And I don't want to get myself off into a corner and get stuck and say, "Well, you said da-da-da-da." No. Everybody's welcome to come into God's kingdom, but there's only one way into God's kingdom. That's through Yeshua, the Messiah. But he's got the door open for everybody. Does somebody have a hand up? No? Oh, okay. Well, sounds like it. Is this some kind of a clue? The God who sees me. And here's that word, if we were to break this down and color code it a little bit. Therefore, the well that was called beer is a beer in Hebrew is a well, you guys. Isn't that interesting? Beer, Lahai, Roy. It's between Kadesh and Bered. But beer is well.
No, it's Be'er.
Be'er. It's not beer. Ah, shoot.
It's not beer.
It's not beer. Okay, it's not beer. It's Be'er. That literally means well. And Lahai, which means of the living one. Lahai. Lahai. Seeing me. Who sees me. Okay? This is the God who sees me. So the mother of Ishmaelites, we got the mother of Israel, who's going to be Sarah, and the mother of the Ishmaelites, who's Hagar. And Hagar is the first one who says, "Oh my gosh, he's the God who sees me." Okay? Can you see how that sets the table and opens up the foundation for the Ishmaelites to come into God's kingdom.
Yeah.
We can't don't count them out. Don't ever count them out. We can't count anybody out. It's open for everybody, even Democrats. Oh. Sorry. Drew?
So is this like a salvation moment for her? Because being Egyptian, she now knew the God of Israel, the one
Yeah.
who saw her.
Yeah, and there's some place in the prophets where God opens up the whole door to the Egyptians. Egypt is going to be safe out of all the mess up times that are coming, and also Syria is going to be, because that's where his people were in those two places. And you're exactly right. She's setting the table for all of Egypt and the Ishmaelites to come
We have to remember
into his kingdom. I think that's a beautiful. It's not just for us Baptists, you know, or old Baptists, or, okay, Charismatics, or whoever we are, Lutheran.
And when Joseph and Mary were fleeing Herod,
Yep.
They went in Egypt, and it says in scriptures, "And from Egypt I will call out my son."
Yep.
But they lived as foreigners in Egypt for a while.
Yep, they did. They sure did. And his whole family lived down there for 215 years. So, yep. Yep. Egypt is the incubator for God's family, and he will see to it that he takes care of his covenant with the Egyptians as well. Okay. We always seem to think anybody outside that little land of modern day Israel is God's enemy. Not necessarily true. Not necessarily true. Anybody can become God's enemy. You know, we don't want to stand in that line. So the rest of this stuff we're watching being played out before our eyes. Hagar bore Abram, she goes home, and Hagar, verse 15, she bore Abram a son, and Abram named his son whom Hagar bore him Ishmael. So they must have talked. Or else God talked to Abram too, because the angel of the Lord told Hagar to name him Ishmael. And why is it that many Muslims from Islam are converting from Islam to Christianity today report seeing and hearing Jesus? That seems to be like the miracle sign. You know, you hear those reports a lot. Oh my gosh, he appeared to me and he told me this and da-da-da-da-da. And I saw a white light, and they're seeing something and they're hearing something as well. It's amazing. Jesus was speaking scripture to them. Jesus is speaking scripture to them today in modern times, even scriptures that they had never heard before. These are the reports that are coming out. Jesus is telling people to do something, and a dream or a vision that led to a feeling of being clean or at peace. These are the reports that different people from Islam are telling about Jesus today. This is how they're meeting him in dreams and visions, and he's coming to them, and they're seeing something and they're hearing something.
And I'd like to add,
a man in white is physically appearing to them. Go ahead.
that in Iran, that a lot of the millennials, give or take around the age of 30, are starting to know and convert to Christianity, the millennial era.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, when we think of these countries, and Iran, Iran is where Cyrus was. I mean, that's Persia, right? Iran is where Cyrus was, and Cyrus did a great service to the Jewish people, and the Jewish people, because it wasn't all of Israel, it was Judah that was over there, and he gave them permission to go back. He sent them back. He paid for the trip. He gave them all the stuff for the temple to build. He paid for the temple. He gave them stuff. You think God's not going to show grace and honor to that country? Even though the enemy is trying to put those people under Islamic, da-da-da-da-da. And so no wonder there's so much persecution, but there's many, many Christians in Iran and Iraq and Syria.
And Scripture also says there's demonic princes over different regions
Sure.
that prevent the truth from coming
Sure.
out. Like
Satan has his own...
Daniel.
Yeah, exactly. Satan has his own army and his own generals and all that kind of thing. So it's not just physical wars, boom, boom, bang, bang, you're dead. It's spiritual warfare that goes on all the time. And it's getting closer, whatever. God's mercy is great, and His sovereign will is accomplished regardless of human foibles. So Abram and Sarah's little, mix up there is not going to stop His will from being accomplished. So it's clear from this story that God works despite misguided human effort, and because of the covenant. That's why His will works, is because of the covenant. And Sarah had no business offering her servant to Abraham, and Abraham had no business sleeping with Hagar. But Sarah was wrong to mistreat her as she did, and yet God works through these situations. So Hagar was blessed. Hagar was blessed, and Abraham and Sarah were still recipients of the promise. It'll just come a little bit later. Okay? God's will is accomplished in spite of us, not because of us. That we should never forget. God's will always be accomplished in spite of us, not because of us. And sometimes He'll use you, Tina, and He'll say, thank you very much, you did a great job, right? Sometimes He will use you, yes. So, the encounter of this desert highway to Shur is the key to how the descendants of Ishmael can come to a saving knowledge of Yeshua. Yeshua, the angel of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh here in this case, met their mother at the well, and he said, return to your mistress and submit yourself to her under her hands. And this is the same, obviously, the same pathway for all the descendants of this other one that's born to Abraham. All the descendants of Ishmael are going to have to come back through by returning, and that's the word teshuvah in Hebrew. Return, shuv, return to this book, essentially to the book of this book, the mother of this book, if you will, to Abraham and Sarah, and follow it. It's the only way back home. So, Ishmael is born. Abraham is 86 years old when he's born. And we'll find out later how old Sarah is. And do you know, a little point of trivia, Sarah is the only, and we don't know her age yet. The Bible hasn't told us, but Sarah is the only woman's age in the entire Bible that is stated. There's no other woman's age stated in the Bible, only Sarah's. So we'll find out about that in the next couple weeks. And I think we're just going to leave it right there for today. I think we'll just leave it right there. Yes, ma'am. Questions and comments?
Ishmael, this kid, he had every chance in the world to be a follower of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh.
He did.
He had a father who was under covenant and a mother who had seen him.
Yep.
So he had every opportunity to be a follower.
What a heritage.
Yeah.
A mother, say that again, a mother who had seen him and a father under covenant.
Yeah, and a father who had seen him and was under covenant.
Wow. That would just make you think that.
But he also had words spoken over him by Yahweh. And those very spoken words of him are more powerful probably than what we look at.
Yeah. If God had just let that kid go, or that lady go off into the desert, number one, she probably would have died. Right? Or she would have been eaten by a rabbit or a tiger or a bear or something. A lion. That's an example of him going out and rescuing someone and putting them on the right track and sending them back home and giving them opportunity. So the opportunity is there and it's established for all time. That's the important thing, for all time. What people do with that is up to them. What you do with your own opportunities are up to you. Right? Yes, go ahead.
Hagar headed back to Egypt at that point.
Well, she was on the road back to Egypt. Remember, that's where the Israelites wanted to go after they couldn't wait on Moses coming down after 40 days. Let's head back to Egypt. Let's go. Let's go back to where we came from. People want to go back to where they come from, and a lot of times where they come from is not a good idea to go back there. It's more of a much better idea to turn back to God. So let's just kind of keep that in mind as we trumble on through this next week. Yes, ma'am.
That pattern again later with the prophet Ezekiel, when he was sent, he ran away and ravens fed him and all that, and the Lord came to him and said,
Elijah, you mean?
or Elijah.
Yeah. Yeah, Elijah. Yeah, exactly. These patterns get repeated and repeated. Yes, ma'am.
Hagar had 12 sons by Abraham.
No, Ishmael has 12 sons.
Oh, Ishmael had 12.
Hagar, I think Hagar will enter back into the story at the end of after Isaac's offering, and he comes back down off the mountain, and Sarah dies, and then Abraham marries a woman by the name of Keturah, and most rabbis say that Keturah is Hagar, is this stranger, and they have 6 more sons. So Abraham's not done by a long shot. Yes, sir.
As that pattern goes, it still is. And this is from a firefighter's point of view.
Okay.
Always look for a second exit, because people always go back to where they came in. And they die many times.
Wow.
Because they have a door right there, and they don't go out.
And they don't go out the second door. Okay. Wow. Interesting.
Like on an airplane, they say the closest exit.
The closest
Look for the
exit.
circle.
That's right.
It may be behind you. Okay.
Because you come in up there, and that nearest exit might be right behind you.
But okay. Spiritually, biblically, that exit's always going to lead you back to the Lord, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a safety exit. It's a safety exit. Okay. Yay. Yes, sir, Bob.
Going back to the exchange between the angel of the Lord with Hagar,
Yeah.
you insinuated that it could have changed. He told him to go back, and that he had the opportunity to come back under the covenant, right? But he spoke, and when he spoke, he said he would be a donkey of a man. So he didn't. He was destined that way.
Well, he told Hagar to go back, and so he said, no, she was just pregnant with him.
Oh.
He was just pregnant. You're jumping ahead in the story. Yeah.
This is what it says: "Look, you are pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You are to call him Ishmael." God pays attention, because Adonai has paid attention to your misery. Here's the key: you will call a wild donkey of a man, and his hand will be against everyone's hand, and they will be against him, living his life at odds with his kinsmen. That was prophesied.
Yep. So that's true. That's true. But it is not going to keep him out of God's kingdom. He's going to have. That's the point. He will be at odds, because in the world system, there's always this and this pushing against each other, and it's a setup for the push against each other that's going to go on throughout the ages, and we're seeing that played out today. And I think we're going to stop right there.